After watching this Club World Cup fantasy video and podcast, you have a detailed understanding of how all the teams could possibly line up in Matchday 1, and you might also be sick of me because this could be a very extensive video, but I think watching this, the chip strategy, how to play guide, and also all the deadline streams will help you be well informed, and all your questions will be answered, of course, in those interactive deadline streams, not to mention more stats, players, and differentials will be covered in other videos, like my team selection, which I'm aiming to do for every single match day, and there will be one more draft headed your way before I start locking things in for the deadline. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. If you enjoy my content, our aim is to get this to the 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 34,000 subscribers. Check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, for links to my videos, amongst my other perks, the Discord server, Club World Cup Fantasy League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. To kick things off, let's start off with Palmeiras, who are in Group A. They face Porto in Matchday 1, followed by Al Ahly and Inter Miami. Now, Palmeiras are 4th in the Brazilian league, and despite winning 8 out of the previous 10 games, they have lost 2 out of the last 3. Abel Ferreira, the manager, his main formation is a 4-2-3-1, but he has switched to a back 3 on several occasions. This includes a 3-4-1-2 and a 3-4-2-1, which can also be seen as a 3-4-3. They won every game in the group stages of the Copa Libertadores with 6 victories, 17 goals scored, and only 4 conceded. In terms of injuries, Bruno Rodriguez, a 6 million forward, has been out since January of 2024, and the best pick in my opinion is Estevao, the right winger, who has 11 goals and 5 assists in 32 matches this season. He also featured for Brazil against Ecuador in the World Cup qualifiers. So that'll be my top pick from Palmeiras. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. The same goes for every other team, especially for those who are fans of these clubs. I know a lot more than me about every single player and also club in general. But let's now move on to their Matchday 1 opponents, Porto, who are facing Inter Miami and Al Ahly in that order for Matchdays 2 and 3. And Porto also have 8 wins out of the last 10 matches. They finished 3rd in the Portuguese league with 65 goals scored and 30 conceded. They lost to Roma in the Europa League knockout playoff round, so they didn't even make the knockout stages there. Their recent friendlies include a 1-0 win versus Wydad Casablanca and a 2-0 defeat against Riga on Sunday, the 8th of June. With injuries, Marko Grujic has been out since late October with a heel injury, and the best picks in my opinion are Samu Agehoa, who is up front, a 4.2 million forward. You've also got Rodrigo Moura, who is a 4.2 million midfielder, and Francisco Moura, who is a left wing back who costs only 4.1 million with incredible stats, which I talked about in my updated draft video. So I think those 3 are the clear standouts. They offer great value in the defense, midfield, and forward line respectively. So I'd highly recommend having 1 or 2 of those assets, especially for match days 2 and 3. But next up, we have Inter Miami, who have Lionel Messi, of course, and he might be a great pick for Matchday 1 as your 12th man, or maybe as part of your setup from the get-go. And they have won their previous 2 matches. However, they only have 3 victories out of their previous 10 and lie in 6th place of the MLS table. They were also eliminated in the CONCACAF Champions Cup semi-final versus Vancouver, and they have so many injuries at the moment. Jordi Alba is doubtful, so we could see him actually on the bench or maybe out of the squad entirely. And if that's the case, Noah Allen, who only costs 4.2 million, would replace him at left back. The other injuries include Gonzalo Lujan, Yannick Bright, Baltasar Rodriguez, Drake Callender, who is usually the starting goalkeeper, and that's why Ostari at 4 million would take his place in Matchday 1 if Callender is still out, and David Ruiz is another injury doubt, and if there are any updates I will provide them in due course, especially before that Matchday 1 deadline. The same goes for every other team. My favourite pick is undoubtedly Lionel Messi, who has 5 goals and 3 assists over the last 3 matches at club level, and he has scored in this competition before, even in a final against Estudiantes. But of course, this is a new format. There are more matches now, and it does resemble the World Cup on the international stage. The next team, though, is the final one of Group A in Al Ahly, who won 6 consecutive matches before losing to Pachuca in a friendly on penalties. They are top of the Egyptian Premier League, but were knocked out of the Egyptian League Cup, and they also reached the CAF Champions League semi-finals, where they were eliminated by another Club World Cup participant in Mamelodi Sundowns. With injuries, Reda Slim has been out injured since Christmas, and my favourite pick is their 4.2 million striker Ali, who has delivered 10 goals and 3 assists in 16 Egyptian League matches. And over the past 7 games, he has scored 9 goals, and in one of them, he scored a poker, 4 goals in a single match. So he has that explosive potential. And against Inter Miami, I think Ali could be a great option. Maybe not so much though for match days 2 and 3. But next up is Group B with the Champions League winners, Paris Saint-Germain, who have a tough game to open things up against Atletico Madrid. And they beat Reims 3-0 in the Coupe de France final. They secured a historic treble after beating Inter Milan 5-0 in the Champions League final. Their record since late November is impressive, as I've talked about in my UCL fantasy videos. They have 32 wins, 5 draws, and 4 losses from the last 41 games across all competitions. However, they have suffered 3 defeats out of the last 11 matches, and Ousmane Dembele will miss the entire group stage, which I talked about in some of my recent videos as well. And Barcola is doubtful, but there is hope he'll be available for match day 1. We could see Gonzalo Ramos start up front instead, and Barcola could start some of the other games in that position, but he is traditionally a left winger by trade, and you'd expect Doué and Kvaratskhelia to start most of these matches. And with all of these teams, there could be a little bit of rotation, especially in match day 1 if they have an easier fixture, but that won't be the case for Atletico Madrid or Paris Saint-Germain. But let's now move on to their opponents in match day 1. Oblak will be in goal. That is pretty much a standard thing there, and they'll go for a 4-4-2 formation as they typically do under Diego Simeone. And my favourite pick would be Julian Alvarez. With PSG, I talked about that a lot in UCL Fantasy, but things have changed slightly. I'd probably pick Doué, Hakimi and Marquinhos because he has less than 5% ownership at this moment in time, and that allows him to qualify for scouting bonus. If you are unaware of what that is, check out my how to play guide and also my chip strategy video. But with Atletico, they face Seattle Sounders in match day 2 and Botafogo in match day 3, and Atletico Madrid finished 3rd in La Liga, and only Athletic Bilbao conceded fewer goals. Simeone's side also reached the Champions League knockout stages, but were eliminated by Real Madrid on penalties. Their recent form includes 6 wins, 1 draw, and 3 losses across all competitions, and there are no injuries at this moment in time. The best picks for me include Alvarez and probably Koke, just because he should start and he's only 4 million, so that's a good enabler in the midfield. But there are 2 others, like Rodrigo Mora, for example, at 4.2 million from Porto. I would class him above Koke at the moment, and I think he's got more explosive potential than the Spaniard, who is a veteran now of football. But next up is going to be Botafogo, who face Seattle Sounders in match day 1. Then it's PSG and Atletico Madrid. They are currently 6th in the Brazilian league and remain unbeaten in home matches. They have 6 wins out of the last 10 overall and have plenty of injuries, which include Bastos, Mateus Martins, Cuiabano, who is a 4 million player, so that could be very interesting in the midfield. He traditionally plays as a left winger as well. Leo Link, Marçal, Jefinho, and Hugo completes an extensive injury list, to say the least. And the best picks, in my opinion, are Igor Jesus up front at 4.1 million and Cuiabano if he's available for match day 1 and he's ready to start there. I think those 2 stand out above the rest. But let's now move on to the final team of Group B in Seattle Sounders. They have 5 wins, 2 draws and 3 losses in recent matches. They're 13th in the MLS with 0 goal difference. Paul Arriola, Jordan Morris, Yeimar Gomez Andrade and Ki-hee Kim are all injured, but the best pick is their attacking midfielder Rusnak, who is the main penalty taker at 5.4 million. They face Botafogo in match day 1, followed by Atletico Madrid and PSG. So if you were to pick one of their players, Rusnak would be my recommendation. Now it's on to Group C, and I think Bayern Munich will attract a lot of heavy investment in match day 1 as they're facing the worst team on paper in Auckland City. I also showed some of the power rankings based on Opta's projections and stats in a recent video, so be sure to check that out. So Bayern Munich won the Bundesliga, scoring 99 goals and boasting the best defensive record. They are unbeaten in 7 matches since their 2-1 loss to Inter Milan in the Champions League. But Upamecano, Davis, Ito, Musiala, Kim Min-jae and Bookman are all injured, and they have so many problems at the back that Eric Dyer could play in the group stages before joining Monaco in a permanent transfer from July onwards. And the best picks for me are Harry Kane, Elise and Guerrero, who should start at left back with Alphonso Davies out of the equation. But after Auckland City, Bayern Munich will face Boca Juniors and Benfica, so it's a fairly decent group overall, but Auckland City will be seen as the whipping boys, I think, and every single one of those teams there will be fancying their chances and trying to get the goal difference up in that game. But who knows? Football can be a funny game and surprises do happen, but Bayern Munich have a very high ceiling in Matchday 1. Let's now move on to the second team in this group, Boca Juniors. They have 6 wins out of 10 matches and finished third in the annual table. They lost 1-0 to Independiente in the Argentinian League playoffs, and Sergio Romero, their main goalkeeper, is injured. The same goes for their main right back, Luis Advíncula. So Marchesín at 4.1 million should replace him, and also Blondell at 4.4 million. Those two are probably going to start in Matchday 1, and the best picks are probably going to be Marchesín as a backup goalkeeper, and also Jimenez if you want that cheap striker, but I wouldn't really recommend it because there are so many great options in that position, and Aguioa is even cheaper and his goal record is far superior to Jimenez. But Boca Juniors will start things off against Benfica, so if you were to invest in this team, I would recommend doing so in Matchday 3 after they played Bayern Munich, which looks very tough on paper. But next up is going to be their opponents in Matchday 1, Benfica, who have Trubin in goal. He is one of the better differentials in that position, in my opinion, but they face Auckland City in Matchday 2, so I don't actually mind going for 2 or 3 Benfica players from the get-go, especially going into that Matchday 2 deadline. I think that's definitely a viable strategy. Now, Di Maria is in the game, but he has left the club. He's joined Rosario Central, his boyhood club there, so he is not going to be a part of the Club World Cup. Do not invest in Angel Di Maria. Bruma should take his place as the right winger, and I think Aktoglu on the left is a very appealing option. He showed some promise in UCL Fantasy. The same goes for Kokchu in the midfield, but Pavlidis for me is the standout up front. He scored a hat-trick against Barcelona, and his goal record this season has been stunning. And facing Auckland City in Matchday 2, that's where the likes of Pavlidis could be a great option. Benfica have 6 wins out of the last 10 games as they finish runners-up in the Portuguese league. They lost to Sporting in the Portuguese Cup final during extra time, and in terms of injuries, Bar, Manu Silva and Amdouni are all out, and there is a chance that 1 or 2 of them could be available for Matchday 1, but it doesn't seem too promising at this moment in time. And in terms of the best picks, I think Pavlidis is the standout overall, but you might want to consider a differential like Antonio Silva, who's also very accessible at 4.7 million. If not Trubin in goal, those two would be next in line for the best Benfica assets, and because their ownership is so low, if they get more than 4 points, they will also give you an additional 2 points for getting a clean sheet, for example, which of course is +5 for a goalkeeper or defender. So basically, if Benfica can keep a clean sheet against Boca and or Auckland City, the likes of Antonio Silva and Trubin, and the same goes for any player with less than 5% ownership, they can give you a really good score quite easily. All they need is to keep that clean sheet, which is definitely possible, especially in Matchday 2. But moving on to the final team of Group C, Auckland City, they have a very, very poor kind of ranking in general, and they're actually, in fact, the worst team of any of them in the Club World Cup. And they face Bayern Munich first and foremost. That's going to be really tough for them. Then it's Benfica and Boca Juniors. They're third in the New Zealand National League. They won the OFC Champions League after a 2-0 victory in the final. They have no injuries, and if he had to pick one player, it's probably their striker, Bevan, who only costs 5 million, but it's not something I'd really recommend, especially in Matchday 1, irrespective of Bayern Munich's injuries. At the back, I still think Auckland City is a team to skip. Now moving on to Group D, Flamengo have made a new signing in Jorginho, who could start from the get-go, especially with Nicolas de la Cruz being injured. He has formed a good partnership in the midfield with Gerson, but I think Jorginho could take his place in Matchday 1, and his price is yet to be confirmed. He hasn't been added to the game yet, but they face ES Tunis in Matchday 1, then it's Chelsea and Los Angeles FC, who replaced Club Lyon a few months ago, and that was also talked about in some of my recent videos, so don't get caught out by that. And in Chelsea's group, it will be Los Angeles, not Lyon. But Flamengo are unbeaten across 8 matches with 4 consecutive wins. They're top of the Brazilian league by a single point. In the Copa Libertadores, they went through to the knockout stages on goal difference. I think 3 teams finished on 11 points, and Jorginho signed for Flamengo only a few days ago after his contract with Arsenal expired. And apart from Nicolas de la Cruz, there is also another injury to Gonzalo Plata, who is a winger there, who was covered in the World Cup a couple of years ago. But the best picks for me are Enrique, their main striker, Michael and Wesley, but you might find a little bit more joy with the likes of Araujo, who's a bit more expensive, but at that price, you'd probably be keen on investing in another team offensively. But I think there could be one or two surprising options from Flamengo who really rise to the surface as a great Club World Cup fantasy option. So maybe you have someone else in mind to highlight as the best pick. But now with Chelsea, we are more familiar with them, of course, with FPL. And of course, next season, they will be covered in UCL Fantasy. So Robert Sanchez should be in goal, but in the Conference League, it was Jorgensen starting those games. And in Matchday 1, they faced Los Angeles, followed by Flamengo, then ES Tunis. I think Flamengo could be quite tough for Chelsea, and I think those two will be battling out for first spot. But with Chelsea, they ended the season really strongly with 8 wins out of the last 10 matches. They finished 4th in the Premier League and won the Europa Conference League. Both David and Wesley Fofana are injured, and the best picks are Palmer, Cucurella, and Enzo Fernandez. And you might even want to go for Colwill just because he's a differential, so that could work quite well. The same goes for Robert Sanchez in goal, but I'm not too keen on the other picks at this moment in time. But they are linked with Gittins, and they might be very close to sealing a deal for him. So if they can get that deal done very soon, maybe you'd want to go for Gittins in Club World Cup Fantasy before that game against Los Angeles in Matchday 1. But moving on to the next team now, that's going to be Los Angeles themselves. Hugo Lloris is there now, so you will obviously recognise him from his time at Tottenham and the French national team. They haven't lost in 9 games, but they're 16th in the MLS table out of 30 teams overall. Inter Miami eliminated them from the CONCACAF Champions Cup during the quarterfinal stage, and there are a few injuries there to Cengiz Under, Lorenzo De La Valle, and Odin Holm. And the best pick for me is going to be their left winger, Boanga, who only costs 7 million. And if you are looking for a differential, that is one I definitely recommend from this group in Group D. So his record is stunning with 8 goals and 3 assists over the past 10 matches. And he's also the main penalty taker. So he is by far my favorite pick from Los Angeles. He's the only one I'd consider from this team. And last but not least, you could say, is ES Tunis, who are a bit under the radar at the moment. They are unbeaten in 11 matches, producing 9 victories during that spell. They're 4 points clear at the top of the Tunisian league. And in the Coupe de Tunis, they are also going strong. However, they lost to Mamelodi Sundowns in the CAF Champions League quarter-final, and they only have 1 injury right now to Roger Hulu. The best picks for me are one of their wingers, so either Sassi or Belali, and the fact that Sassi is only 4.4 million makes him stand out above the rest. And you might even want a 4 million enabler in that defensive line, but I'd honestly recommend Francisco Moura from Porto at 4.1 million because his attacking threat is stunning, and Porto have a decent team and defense overall, so that will be my recommendation if you are in the market for a cheap defender as your 4th or 5th option in that position. But we're now moving on to yet another group, and this is going to be Group E with River Plate kicking things off. They have only lost 1 out of the last 17 matches across all competitions. They finished 4th in the annual table and lost to Platense during the playoffs. They're unbeaten in the Copa Libertadores so far, with 3 wins and 3 draws being enough to secure top spot of their group. With injuries, there's Agustin Roberto, Gonzalo Montiel, Maximiliano Mesa, and Leandro Pires. The best picks for me are 2 budget options in Mastantuono and Armani, but it's worth noting that the former will join Real Madrid after this Club World Cup has ended, so this will be the last tournament that Mastantuono plays for River Plate. And in Matchday 1, they face Urawa Red Diamonds, followed by Monterrey, and then Inter Milan. That's a fairly decent group, and I think for the first 2 match days, River Plate could offer great value, and those 2 are by far the best options, Mastantuono and Armani. Inter Milan reached the Champions League final, of course, but that 5-0 loss will leave a sour taste in their mouths. You also have, of course, Simone Inzaghi leaving the club, but Inter Milan only have 4 wins out of the last 11 matches across all competitions, and they will appoint a new manager who will reportedly use this same formation, a 3-5-2, at the beginning, but then he'll transition to a back four later during his tenure. They delivered a 2-0 win away from home versus Como on the final day, but it wasn't enough to secure that Serie A title. They finished 1 point off Napoli, and in terms of injuries, Calhanoglu is doubtful, so we could see a change in that position. Bisek and Carboni are two other injuries that Inter Milan have. So I think with Calhanoglu and Bisek, they suffered these problems during that Champions League final, and the best picks would be Dumfries, Sommer, and Lautaro Martinez, who cost 9.8 million, so I don't think he offers the best value overall, but I think Dumfries and Sommer are still worthwhile, even for a defensive double-up against Monterrey and Urawa Red Diamonds. But I think River Plate could get a decent result against Inter Milan, or at least cause some problems there. But Inter's defense is still solid overall. I don't think we can judge too much from what happened in Matchday 17 of UCL Fantasy, and PSG just went to another level on that particular night. But the third team in this group is Monterrey, and Sergio Ramos is in this team actually, and their manager is Martin de Michelis, who used to manage River Plate, so that'll be a very interesting reunion in Matchday 2. But Monterrey have 6 wins and 4 losses in recent matches, and they're 7th in the Mexican League. So the main formation that de Michelis uses is a 4-2-3-1. However, he has switched to a 4-1-4-1, a 4-3-3, and even a back three at times. So this could be a quite difficult team to predict in terms of their lineup for Matchdays 1 and going forward. Now, their injured player is Carlos Salcedo, and the best pick for me is Bertarame, who has 3 goals and 1 assist over the last 4 matches, and is classified as a 6 million forward. Canales is decent. He can play as an attacking midfielder or on the right, and even if they play a back three, Canales can still play in an advanced position as a central midfielder. But essentially, I think Bertarame is the best of a relatively bad bunch in that forward line. I'm not too fond of De La Rosa. Of course, you never know. Maybe he's the one popping in the goals, playing up front, and I think Monterrey could be worth the investment in Matchday 3 facing Urawa Red Diamonds. But against Inter Milan and River Plate, I'd probably avoid most of their assets, even Bertarame personally, but if I had to pick one of them, it would be that 6 million forward. Now, next up is going to be the last team in Group D, and that's Urawa Red Diamonds. They have 5 wins out of the last 10 games. They're 3rd in the J1 League and sit 6 points off top spot. Now, in terms of injuries, there's only one, just like Monterrey, and that's Kai Shibato. The best picks would be their fullbacks, Ishihara or Ogiwara, but in terms of attacking threat, I think their right back, Ishihara, has offered even more this season, so he would be my #1 pick, but it's essentially because of his price tag, nothing more, and you might get a decent return from him in one match day, but against River Plate or Inter Milan in the first 2 match days, I wouldn't be too hopeful of that being the case. But let's move on to the next group now, in Group F with Borussia Dortmund. They ended this season strongly with 2 clean sheets across the last 3 games. They have 5 consecutive victories and 8 wins from the last 10 matches overall. After a dismal start to the season, they finished 4th in the Bundesliga while reaching the quarterfinals of the Champions League. The likes of Schlotterbeck, Mane, Koulibaly and Özcan are injured at the moment, and the best picks include Guirassy, Kobel and Ryerson, but even the likes of Svensson and maybe Bensabani, they have low ownership, so because of scouting bonus, they might be even better than Ryerson. It's just also a question of budget and would you be able to afford the extra 0.3 or 0.4 million necessary, but those would be my favourites. Julian Brandt is showing a lot of good form recently, and Adeyemi has that high ceiling, and it's a pretty promising group on paper, facing Fluminense, Mamelodi Sundowns and Ulsan HD, so I think doubling or tripling up on Borussia Dortmund could be a viable strategy, but despite their strong end to the campaign, they can be an inconsistent team and sometimes let you down. So I am a little bit cautious about Borussia Dortmund, but I'd certainly recommend having at least one of their players, and you could definitely make 2 or 3 out of them in the group stages. I think that could be quite feasible, to be quite honest with you. Now, I'm not too interested in the other teams in this group, but Fluminense are probably the second best on paper. They are 5th in the Brazilian League, and they won the last 4 matches and finished top of their group in the Copa Sudamericana, which is the equivalent of the Europa League in Europe. So with injuries, Otavio, Herman Cano, Agustin Canovio and Facundo Bernal are currently doubtful for Matchday 1. The best picks include Arias, who is playing as their right winger followed by Serna, who's on the left-hand side, and he costs 4.7 million, but you might also be interested in the 4 million fullbacks, so Guga and Fuentes. But Borussia Dortmund in Matchday 1 looks fairly tough on paper. Then it's Ulsan HD, and then Mamelodi Sundowns to conclude the group stages. So I think you could go for one Fluminense asset, maybe even two for Matchday 2, but otherwise I'd probably urge you to go for other teams instead, like Porto, for example, who have good fixtures, they're a better team overall, they're more reliable, and their assets offer great value in Francisco Moura, Rodrigo Mora, and Samu Ageoa. Having said that, you may feel differently, which is completely fine. Football is a game of opinions, and you might be backing teams like Fluminense to go far in this competition, or you think they have some pretty underrated assets that deserve more recognition, and that's what it's all about. Let's continue the conversation in the comment section and across all my social media platforms. The links can be found in the description. But the third team here is Mamelodi Sundowns, who have won 6 consecutive games recently, but they're now winless in 2 matches. They have built a 12-point lead at the top of the South African Premier Division. They lost the CAF Champions League final versus Pyramids, and they only have one injury in Sianda Nyanga, and the best pick for me is their striker Reyners, who has 6 goals and 1 assist over the last 7 matches, and I think it could be worth a punt facing Ulsan HD to kick things off. Then it's Borussia Dortmund, and they conclude the group stages facing Fluminense, but I think Ulsan HD would be a pretty decent fixture on paper, and Reyners would be my favourite Mamelodi Sundowns asset. But finally, in this group, we've got Ulsan HD, who face Mamelodi Sundowns, Fluminense, and Borussia Dortmund in that order. So they are third in the K-League 1, and they advance to the quarterfinals of the Korean Cup. With 5 wins out of their previous 10 games, Ulsan HD have struggled for consistency, but they have no injuries, which is a big positive for them. And the best pick is probably Jae Seok, who has been classified as a 4 million defender, yet he has started several games as a winger on the left and right flanks. So his low price tag and out of position status makes him worth adding to the watch list, but I'm not really backing them to keep many clean sheets. Maybe one of them in match days 1 or 2, you could say, because the fixtures look a bit more appealing on paper, but that's really the only asset I'd recommend from Ulsan HD to at least consider. I'm not sure if I'm going to include them in any draft or my final team selection, to be quite honest with you, but I think it's worth mentioning or highlighting the best asset from every single one of these clubs, even if you're not too fond of that particular team or their chances of advancing to the next round. But Manchester City will be one of the favourites to win this competition after a disappointing season for their lofty standards. They had a solid end to their Premier League campaign and won 7 of the last 10 matches overall. Only Liverpool scored more goals than them in the Premier League as they finished 3rd in that table. But they lost the FA Cup final to Crystal Palace, and they had their worst season in 8 years. They won the Community Shield, but that's about it. Kovacic had an Achilles tendon surgery last week, and the best picks include Haaland, Marmoush, and Gvardiol. You might want to take a punt on Rico Lewis, who might not even start at right back, because we could see Mateus Nunes start there once more. And I think Gonzalez will partner Bernardo Silva as the 2 holding midfielders, so to speak. But before this season, I don't think City really played a 4-2-3-1 that often. They usually played a 4-3-3, and they change formations quite often. We could see that happen once more. And against Wydad Casablanca and Al Ain, we could see mass rotation. We really could, and Man City can still get the job done. So are the likes of Marmoush and Haaland completely safe? Maybe they aren't, but I think they're worth the punt, and their ceiling will be really high in those 2 match days. But Juventus is a really difficult fixture, and they beat Man City earlier this season, so we might get another interesting battle there for top spot in that group. But Juventus will go for a 3-4-2-1 formation, and they're undefeated in 5 matches, but they drew 16 games in Serie A. They finished 4th to qualify for next season's Champions League, but Europe was a major disappointment for them as they lost to PSV in the knockout playoff rounds. Locatelli, Milik, and Perrin are currently injured, so Locatelli is a bit of a doubt there. We could see a change in that position, and the best picks include Cambiasso, who just about has less than 5% ownership, but that could change very soon. Di Gregorio in goal is another one with around 4.8% ownership, so he can qualify for the scouting bonus currently. And my favourite attacker would be Yildiz, who only costs 7.3 million and his ownership is quite low overall. The opening fixtures look quite promising against Al Ain and Wydad Casablanca, and you could load up on Juventus and Man City and then wildcard in Matchday 3 and get rid of their players to avoid that heavyweight clash towards the end of the group stages. So that is one viable strategy which could work very well, and that is really important, I think, to get off to a flying start. So I think maybe loading up on Juventus and Man City in Matchday 1 can definitely help you, and then you get rid of them on that early wildcard. But the third team in this group is Al Ain, who will likely go for a 3-5-2 formation. They face Juventus and Man City, but Matchday 3 looks quite promising against Wydad Casablanca, and Al Ain have a similar unbeaten streak to Juventus with no losses across the last 7 games. They're 5th in the UAE Pro League and finished bottom of the AFC Champions League elite table with 0 wins and 6 losses in that competition. They're experiencing a disappointing season so far, but they have no injuries at the moment, and the best picks would include Loa, who has produced 8 goal contributions across his previous 10 games. I'm not too fond of the other picks, even the kind of budget options like Traore or Palacios, but I think one of their strikers could be quite decent, especially in Matchday 3 against Wydad Casablanca. And speaking of which, let's go on to their team right now. They'll probably go for a 4-2-3-1 formation. I would completely avoid them in Matchdays 1 and 2, but just like with Al Ain, you might want to consider 1 or 2 Wydad Casablanca assets in Matchday 3. They have 5 wins from 10 matches, and with a 16-point deficit to first place, they are 3rd in the Botola Pro League. They reached the quarterfinals of the Morocco Excellence Cup, and their recent friendlies resulted in 1-0 defeats to Sevilla and Porto. They only have 1 injured player in Renan Viana, and the best pick is probably Benabid as their 4 million goalkeeper. You can use him as a backup, but a lot of the players haven't been added to the game yet. I think only 4 of them have been, so you can see a lot of TBCs. That means to be confirmed. We saw that with Jorginho earlier in this video and podcast, but against Al Ain, you might want to go for 1 Wydad Casablanca asset, maybe even 2, but I'm not too fond of these picks in general, and the fact we don't know the prices for most of their players doesn't really help things too much as well. But let's go on to the final group now, and Real Madrid are one of the favourites as well to win this competition, but they've had a pretty poor season by their standards. They lost the Copa del Rey final to Barcelona in extra time. They also finished runners-up in La Liga and lost to Arsenal 5-1 on aggregate in the Champions League. Despite winning the UEFA Super Cup, Carlo Ancelotti left Real Madrid and is now managing the Brazilian national team, and Xabi Alonso has replaced him. He usually uses a 3-4-2-1 formation, and we will see him in action for the first time as a manager in charge of Real Madrid against Al Hilal in Matchday 1, and they have made 2 signings already in Trent Alexander-Arnold and Dean Howson, who I think will both start in Matchday 1 there. With injuries, Real Madrid have so many. That includes Courtois, Valverde, Alaba, Diaz, Mendy and Rudiger, who could all return for Matchday 1, but they are doubtful, and Camavinga will miss the group stages. The likes of Carvajal and Eder Militao won't return until August, and the best picks would be Mbappe, Vinicius Jr. and probably Bellingham, but you always have some underrated picks like Rodrigo. If he stays at Real Madrid, he would be a fine option, especially for the group stages. And despite the fact that Al Hilal looks quite tough in Matchday 1, Los Blancos are still the heavy favourites to win that game, and against Pachuca and Red Bull Salzburg, I think Real Madrid can win them quite comfortably, maybe even keep clean sheets, but most importantly score a lot of goals, and they're always going to create a lot of chances, and Mbappe is in incredible form right now, scoring in 8 consecutive games, so he is definitely one of the standout picks in Club World Cup Fantasy. But the second team here is going to be Al Hilal, who I think are a very decent proposition, and they've got some very interesting options there indeed. They are 2nd in the Saudi Pro League, despite scoring 95 goals, the most of any team in that competition. They reached the semi-finals of the AFC Champions League Elite, where they lost to Al Ahly, and Al Dawsari on the left-hand side, he was the top scorer in that competition. Now, 6 wins out of the previous 10 games marks decent form, but Jorge Jesus has been replaced by Simon Inzaghi as the manager, and Christian Chivo has now moved on to Inter Milan now. Reports indicate that Victor Osimhen has rejected Al Hilal, and they still want to get a marquee signing done by the 10th of June. And this video is recorded on Monday the 9th, so we'll see if Al Hilal get any big names in, and that can be covered in the deadline stream with the updated graphics for the lineups here. but with injuries, Marcos Leonardo could be available versus Real Madrid, but Joao Cancelo, Caio Cesar, Hamad Al-Yami, Malcolm, and Moteb Al-Harbi are doubtful, and the best picks would probably be Mitrovic and Salim Al-Dawsari. Be very careful about that because there are 3 Al-Dawsaris in Al Hilal. So we've got one at right back, one in the midfield, and then as the left winger. The one that I really recommend only costs 5.6 million, and his first name is Salim. I talked about him in my first draft video and podcast as well. But Red Bull Salzburg have some pretty decent choices too. They are another team with 6 wins out of the last 10 matches. In the Austrian Bundesliga, they only trail Sturm Graz, and the OFB Cup has also been disappointing after being knocked out by LASK. They finished 34th out of 36 teams in the Champions League group stages, and the likes of Schlager, Henry Blank, Galfries, Guindo, Musaio, Capaldo, Canate, and Kjaergaard are doubtful. And over the last couple of days, we recently got an update about Schlager from RB Salzburg on their website, and they said the following: there is no operation required for Schlager's wrist injury, but it needs to be protected by a splint for several weeks. Whether he can play in the Club World Cup depends on the course of his recovery. So for Matchday 1, I think Blažević will start at 5 million, and Schlager is really overpriced anyway. So I think a lot of the goalkeepers in this game have definitely been overvalued, and there should have been some cheaper price tags, but we have to work with what we've got. And I just wouldn't go for Blažević. He was terrible in UCL Fantasy, and if you had him and Di Gregorio, you know my pain in that game. So I definitely would urge you to avoid that. I think Di Gregorio could be decent because of the Matchday 1 and 2 fixtures for Juventus, but I would not recommend Blažević. If you had to go for any of their players, I would probably suggest their right winger, or essentially the right attacking midfielder in this 4-2-2-2 formation, and that's going to be Nene Dorgeles. He has produced 8 goals over the past 10 matches, so in this game he's simply known as Nene. I think he is a very good differential on paper. He is also the main penalty taker, so against Pachuca in Matchday 1, I think Nene is a very enticing option indeed if you are in the market for that differential. So if he does get more than 4 points with less than 5% ownership, you will get a very nice score indeed. Even Al Hilal in Matchday 2 is decent, and could Nene score against Real Madrid? I think it's possible, but it's really Matchday 1 that you're looking for if you are in the market for that differential in the midfield or forward line. I think you could also look at Baidu and maybe Radkov, but Nene is the informed player from RB Salzburg. And the last team is Pachuca. Yes, 32 teams in this competition, and all of them have been covered with potential lineups, injury updates, and form. But Pachuca have 4 victories out of their previous 10 games. After an inconsistent season, they finished 8th in the Liga MX Clausura. This was followed by a 2-0 loss to Club America in the playoff quarterfinals. They played a friendly versus Al Ahly, and after a 1-1 draw, Pachuca won on penalties. They have no injuries right now, and the best pick is probably Rondon. He has converted 7 goals over 10 games for club and country. He scored the winners versus Peru and Bolivia for Venezuela, while securing a hat-trick for Pachuca in the Mexican League not so long ago. I think it was back in April. And against RB Salzburg in Matchday 1, I think Rondon is yet another punt that could be worth the investment. I'd probably avoid all of their assets though against Real Madrid and Al Hilal. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below as always. Which players are you interested in? Do you have a different opinion about the best assets from every single one of these teams? And do you think there could be some changes in terms of formations, maybe some new signings, and how things will change for certain clubs going into Matchday 1? Do you think the likes of Man City will rotate against Wydad Casablanca? I would like to see all your thoughts there. Let's continue the conversation, and in future videos, I'll offer even more information, insight, and also some top differentials and great picks for you, so you pick the best captaincy options and have a great platform for success in Club World Cup Fantasy. After extensive coverage of all of the teams participating in the Club World Cup, that concludes this video, and hopefully this has been very helpful, especially for those who don't know much about teams from other continents and even from some teams in Europe. I completely get why you might not have watched some of these teams and players before, but I think after this tournament and watching all my videos, you'll have a better idea of the best assets in this game, and some of them might even go to the Premier League next season, or maybe you'll see them in the Champions League where they'll be covered in UCL Fantasy as well. And you can also join my mini league, and the code is in the description. You can see it on the top left hand corner of your screen, and there's also an auto join link to make it even easier thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you never miss a single uploaded live stream for UCL Fantasy, FPL, and the Club World Cup. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, Club World Cup Fantasy League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you very soon for more Club World Cup Fantasy content. That will include a deadline stream this weekend, so keep your eyes peeled 1 or 2 hours before the deadline. It will be a late one in the UK, but I'll be there nonetheless, answering all your questions, and we'll have a great time there as we optimize our squads, aiming to win our mini leagues and rise up the rankings.